Hey, today I wanted to share how I edit my photos. Lately, I've been traveling for a couple months now and I have endless amount of photos to go through and sort. And I thought today it would be nice to show my whole editing process from start to finish, from taking the photo to editing the photo, and some tips and tricks. First, let me introduce myself. Hi, I'm Alan and I take photos. It's been maybe like 5-6 years ever since I started, and during high school / college I always borrowed a camera, took many photos, studied it for a bit, and yeah, now I'm here creating content and photos for clients and doing personal film projects. So let's start off with my camera. In fact, I use a Sony a7C II with a 18 to 15mm lens. That's f2.8 and it's a Sigma lens. It's really budget, especially for a broke boy like me, and it's also quite versatile, so I can have different shots like wide shots and also close-up shots. With that, I also have a mist filter, and that is to create these nice bloomy effects. And what it does, it essentially makes the highlights really bloomy, really dreamy, and kind of softens the photo a bit. This is perfect for portraits since I take a lot of them and I don't really want my photos to be too sharp, especially because of skin. And also I really love the dreamy effect and love the white highlights, the bloomy highlights. I really love it so much. But with the mist filter, you often lose a lot of detail, so bear that in mind. It's probably not the best for studio shoots. And I shoot in RAW plus JPEG. What the what? So I often use JPEG just because I love sending the photos straight away to clients, to friends, to share the photos really quickly to get feedback and also know what they want. And with that, I can quickly edit the photos on my phone, the raw photos, using Adobe Lightroom really quickly to get a really quick photo done and send it straight away, which is really good. And I often do that so much, especially with friends, especially with quick photo shoots. But with all the bulk photos or with all the heavy editing, I do on my laptop, and I use Bridge plus Lightroom and Photoshop. And basically, you might have already heard Lightroom and Photoshop, but Bridge is basically the same thing. It uses Camera Raw and I can quickly browse and sort through my images. I thought I might add what the hell RAW and JPEG is, because you might have heard everyone say, oh, only shoot in RAW, why are you shooting in JPEG? Or like stuff like that. And I thought I'll probably explain why it's really important to understand. RAW photos are basically specific to each camera, and so each camera brand has their own type of RAW file type. And what that means is that the photo preserves a lot of its qualities, so its shadows, its color, and it's a really high quality photo. And it's often really big too, so like 30 MB, and that's huge compared to a JPEG that's only like max 2-3 MB, right? Maybe 8. And often, it's really difficult to share this file because it's so big, but also not many applications can even open the photo, or if it can, it will distort it heavily. You won't be able to send that raw photo and post it on social media so easily. You have to post-process the raw photo too. Not to mention, it is very dull, very bland, very grey, and that's because it's preserved all that colors, all that information for you to then later on process it. Shoot in RAW, if not RAW plus JPEG. Oh, also with my SD card, I have a 256GB SD card. However, I would highly recommend, if you're shooting quite professionally, really important photos and photo shoots, to split it into two. Maybe have 128 or 64 and 64 if you don't shoot that much. And that's because it acts as a failsafe. You have one photo shoot split into two SD cards. If one of them somehow breaks, or one of them somehow corrupts, you have the second half to deal with, and you just don't lose the whole shoot. So I thought that would be really important to add, especially if you have really important moments to capture and want to make sure you have everything. Okay, now you have all these photos. What the hell do you do now? Oh my gosh, crazy. You have thousands of photos to go through. Well, how about we back that photo first, because your SD card, you cannot edit straight through it. Okay, you gotta save it into an SSD, external hard drive. Personally, I would just use an SSD, and I put all those photos into that SSD. Open Bridge and start going through them. Now, let's pick one photo and let's go through it together, shall we? Okay, so I've got a demo photo for us to, edit from start to finish, and this is Haruto from Osaka, Japan. He is a hairstylist. He did my perm twice, so I thought it'll be fun to, edit the photo together. So I opened Bridge and I have, this lovely photo. So obviously this is a raw photo, and this in particular I picked. This already has good composition. I love the lighting already, and I love everything about it. Let's start off with light. Now, you can easily edit your photos with presets. I'll get onto that in a little bit. However, this is just me and my experience. So I'm going to talk about all these options, light, color, the basics first, and then we'll get on to the good stuff. So let's talk about light. In fact, this is already quite exposed really well. In fact, I love how everything is kind of lit, really evenly lit. I love the lighting in this hair salon, it's so good. Since everything's quite exposed already, really white. I really like the dreamy look from the mist filter, so I'm going to only expose it just a little bit, maybe like can't go too high, going too low. I actually maybe want to go around here, will be good. And that's because I want to mess with the shadows later on to make the image pop a bit more. So in fact, the contrast, let's move the contrast a little bit higher. I want to get that nice blacks, really defined face. His face is very sharp already. And in fact, I want to put that not too high just because I have different ways of creating contrast already. Minor adjustments, good enough. Highlights, I always over highlight the photo just because I love it so much. I love having it washed out look. Not too high, but in fact a little bit, if you go really low, that's obviously a good way to do it, but you lose all that bloom effect, and maybe that's what you want, but for me, I want that bloom effect quite nicely, so let's go for 27. And then for shadows, in fact, I always put the shadows really down, really low, just because it creates a good contrast, very depth, very dynamic. However, sometimes I don't want that, and I want a nice washed out look, so what I often do is I would put it down. But in this case, I'm actually gonna put it not so down. I'm gonna put it like here. Just because I use blacks as a way to create contrast as well. So the whites is already quite bright. In fact, this is already really quite exposed. I don't know if you can tell. If you pull the whites down, you lose that highlights a bit. And so I don't wanna lose that too much. In fact, I only wanna put a little bit. So maybe like very minor touches. But to me, I see the difference. For the shadows, I'm gonna put it back to 22, 20. Oh, this is too overexposed. This is good, like around here. Now the blacks, I would pull it down a bit just because there's a lot of black here and it really creates that good contrast. And his face, we want to make it a little bit sharper, so just pull it down a little bit like here. Oh, also, no wonder, my vibrance is really down, my bad. So no wonder the photo looked really bland. I put the vibrance really low, probably by accident. Whoops. But yeah, as you can see, this photo, it's quite dull, quite dark. Fixing the basic light stuff, it makes it pop really well. And obviously fixing the vibrance, don't do that. And actually I'm quite happy with it. And yeah, now, all this takes a lot of time and a lot of brain power, a lot of reference photos. I wish there was just one way to quickly edit all photos, bam, like that. And oh wait, there is a way. In fact, I have presets. What's crazy? Now, with these presets, you can quickly, easily edit your photos like how I do. And these are presets that I use all the time. In fact, I made them and I use them for my photos. So if you want to support me, that'd be so great. And if you want to save time too, if you do end up using them, let me see your photos. I would love to see. So just head over to my website at alandrawsclouds.com or .co.uk and, get editing. Yeah, love it. Now let's change the color temperature. Now, you want to be really careful with the color temperature because it's basically just for skin tone, how I like to do it, and also the mood, the atmosphere, like the ambience, the vibes. I already love it already. I just think it's too yellow. It's not really my style. It's not really what I'm gonna go for. So I'm gonna change it a little bit to the left, like over here. And I think that's already really good for me. And in terms of the tint, you see, this is quite yellow, just a little bit. In fact, actually, this is pretty okay, but I'm gonna, change it anyway just to see what I lean towards too. And that is like here, boom, boom. It gives a really, this is so bright. In fact, it's so bright, which I will fix later because I think it's so exposed by using the curves later on. Now, in terms of vibrance, I don't really touch that. I never do. The colors are already so bright in this photo, but let's test it out anyways and go for something like that. I think it brings out the hair, the plants, and I will later change in color correction. So I'm not really a fan of using the vibrance that much. In fact, I'm gonna lower it right down to probably around here. This is already so good. I love this already. But let's talk about the texture, clarity, and dehaze. Oh, before we even touch anything, I completely forgot. But down here, let's go to optics and let's remove chromatic aberration, because that's that little purple hue thing around, you know, your face, your hair that you might find. In fact, this one doesn't really have it, but I just do it as a general rule. And then in terms of use of profile correction, what that is that every lens has a kind of warp to it, especially distortion, you know, fish eyes, that kind of thing. And it's kind of distracting sometimes, but for me, I really like how dynamic lenses look when they have a little bit of warp. It really does change the face shape. But in terms of this lens, the outside bit, the borders kind of get warped out inwards or outwards, I don't know. But if we have the correction on, which basically all the lenses get tested and they get kind of like this preset that it's included in the software. You know, these companies like Sony, Canon will send this information, send the lenses to Adobe, and they will try and figure out the kind of information that they need to recover. And you know, your pictures, you know, hold information of what lens they use, and you know, it already knows which lens you used and fixes it. But personally, I love how dynamic these lenses look sometimes, especially for portraits, so I turn it off. And you can obviously see it has a little natural vignette already. That's really what I love. Now for effects, textures, I won't touch it too much because I think this is an already amazing photo. It has so much texture to it. Clarity is really clear, the focus is amazing. Let's go for texture. If I like it, I like it. If I don't, nah, I'm not feeling it. The mist filter makes everything quite dreamy, and you know, the detail is already preserved so much that you see hair detail, you see skin detail. It's already quite textured. And for dehaze, oh yeah, dehaze makes it really quite dynamic actually. Let's boost that up just a little bit. Yeah, it's quite dynamic already, has the shadows and everything, really cool. The face is very, very dynamic. And in terms of vignette, it already has a natural vignette. If you want to add more, go ahead. I'll go for a darker vignette just because the focus is on him. Yeah, you can add just a bit, maybe just a bit. There we go, lovely. Just a little bit of vignette. And then how about we go to curves? Now, curves is really, really tricky because you got to understand the different parts of the curves. So here it controls like the black, the shadows, and so I don't want it to be too sharp. In fact, I don't want the blacks to be too black too. So let's ever so slightly just boost up a little bit like that. And then let's deepen the shadows just a little bit, like over here. You know, since it's quite washed out, I want to have a little bit of detail, a little bit of shadows that's still there. And then let's go to the mid areas, like the highlights areas, and let's boost it up just a wee bit, just a wee bit. And in terms of whites, the whites I already love. I don't want to touch too much about it. The highlights I already love too much. A little bit down. Oh, perfect. Okay, I think that makes the picture really, really bright, really dynamic. You know, usually people do S-curves and there's already curves that you can learn. However, I go by feeling, and you know, if all in doubt, S-curve is really great. Now my favorite part, I really love color correction. And in fact, how about we start with calibration, because usually that's the first thing I do, but sometimes I don't. Actually, my order of color correcting can start with just, you know, manually picking the colors, color mixing, and then calibration. However, let's skip the calibration for now, just because I want to go straight into the color correction. Now with hues, I already think everything is quite great. Let's compare before and after. Okay, everything is really bright actually, super bright. I just quickly changed the shadows a bit. I think that's okay. Now in terms of reds, you know, this will affect the skin tone quite a lot. Maybe change the reds just a bit, just because of the lips, maybe like very slight adjustment. And then how about we change the oranges? I don't want to change because it changes the skin tone, and that's really a no-no. How about we change the green and yellows a bit? You know, it changes his hair, which I think is pretty funny. He has really blonde hair. How about that? It changes to a nice yellow. In terms of blue, I love contrasting, you know, teal, orange, and he has blonde hair, so I think that's really cool. Let's change the blue and make it contrasty enough, but not so much that it distracts the image. Love that. So I think this already changes the light, changes the blues, and you can see it creates a really good contrast around with the lights here. With these lights are quite orange, his hair, a lot of contrast, and this is really why I love this photo. There's just so much to it, but it's really simple. Let's go for saturation now, and saturation is really tricky because, you know, you don't want things to be too colorful, and you don't want things to look very odd, you know. For example, skin tone, too orangey, too red, it could look really off. So let's be careful with, you know, our reds and oranges, and only change it just a little bit. To make skin feel quite alive, it does need red because, you know, our blood is red, and, you know, light will show that red hue. And so gotta add a little bit of red, and I would only just add a little bit like that. I think that's pretty good. Now, in terms of more skin tone, you know, oranges, we gotta pull it down to make it desaturated, or pull it to the right to make it more saturated. And I think we want to put a little bit of saturation, just a little bit. And I think it makes it pop a little bit. It's great. Now, in terms of the yellow, I don't want to touch the yellow too much. It kind of, you know, kills his hair, kills the plants, kills his shorts. Let's not do that. The green, let's make the green a little bit more, how do I put it? More rich. I don't want to touch the blues. I think it's already quite nice. Okay, now that we have everything done, we got the lights, we got the exposure done, got the color correction. Now you want to do a bit of color grading. It depends on the photo. If you want a more like vintage look, if you want a blue look, film look, this is where you kind of mess with those settings. However, I think this photo already, the colors are really nice. I love it so much. I'm just going to change the shadows just a bit blue, just because I think it will tie everything together. All the colors, it'll make it a little bit more blue, the shadows, and wow, yeah, it's a really small difference. However, it really makes the picture just look coherent. Okay, so this is before. It was very gray, very dull. This is after. It's quite bright. In fact, it's really bright, but I really like that actually. It's kind of like the overexposed kind of look to it. Oh, the whites are really bright, but there's a lot of contrast too. And so that's why everything's quite balanced. If you want to change the shadows to make it a lot more stronger, like the hue, you can definitely change the blending and increase it like that, but I honestly will just leave it personally. Now we go all the way to calibration, and sometimes you do this first, sometimes it depends on your flow. You do it after. I would personally just change the blue just to make it like here. It's too blue already, so I don't want to change it too much. Maybe the reds I want to change. There's no general rule or anything. It's just about creating balance and creating contrast. But I think that's honestly it. I love this photo already. I have a really good photo. I love how it is, but I want to still keep experimenting, and you can do this by creating a snapshot. And what that is, it's basically a save file where you can just save your edits. Let's do V1. Perfect. Now, I just think, oh, maybe this one might be too bright. So let's turn the shadows down a little bit down, and also I want to change it purple now. How about that? And this might be even better than before, but you're also not too sure. So you can save this as V2 and switch between the two if you want to go for a more blue look, and then there's this look. And I think it's really good to experiment with your photos, see which one's your best, find your style, and yeah, that's really it. But before we even like finish the photo, before we say it's done, I want to clean it up a bit, you know. As much as his beautiful face is quite clear already, there's a few things that maybe I can smoothen, and also his shorts, his pants, they're a bit dirty. So let's quickly fix that with Photoshop. And bam, done. You can now crop this photo. In fact, I always leave cropping to the last, just because I think it's good to have the whole image first and then see, you know, you can always crop it to whatever size you want. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for sticking right until the end. I know this video is quite long. I hope you really learned something, and I hope it inspires you to get creating and get editing. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye now.